It's always very sinister when an American voice tells you you're being recorded. So lots of things have been happening. Lots of things have even been happening today on buses, and we can get to that. What I'm going to do is run through some slides with you. As we haven't got a huge group, if there are any points as we're going through that you really need to raise with me, then please do so. So Mendip, one of the 4 districts in Somerset, and we've had very good followings from Mendip over the various meetings that we've had, and it's good to see you all here this evening. We're going to be talking about bus cuts, about investment on buses going chiefly to Taunton. We can talk about that later on. And then the all-important thing is getting more people onto Somerset's buses. But let's just start with a brief recap, particularly for those who haven't been to these meetings before, to see why it's all happened, why we're having meetings like this, why we need to have meetings like this. Somerset Bus Partnership was set up just over a year ago. It's a volunteer group set up by bus passengers, parish and town councillors, transport campaigners, transport enthusiasts, bus user groups, and individuals across Somerset. We now have something like over 130 local representatives for parishes and towns across the county, which is actually a very impressive representation of the county. We work with parishes and town councils across Somerset. We have a Facebook page, which we'd invite you to visit, a website. We get quoted in the press and on radio and on television. And we have both the chair and the vice chair of Somerset County Council's Bus Users and Stakeholders Group, which was set up by Somerset some 6 months ago. And I'm actually the chair of that group. And what we really want to do is to encourage and support bus user groups being set up across Somerset. We have a long established one in Frome and Villages, which I'm a member of. And we've very recently, in the last 6 weeks, formed one in Bridgewater, and one is being formed currently in Yeovil, prompted in no small measure by bus cuts, which will affect both of those towns. We would encourage, but it's your decision, that you consider forming a bus user group in Wells. In Glastonbury, I know there's been quite a lot of interest in Glastonbury about setting up a group, possibly in combination with Shepton Mallet, possibly in combination with Street. We'd like to work with anybody who wants to set up a bus user group, give you the benefit of some 6 years experience with Frome and Villages bus user group. But it's particularly important when there are bus changes and most especially bus cuts. And we've seen that, as I say, in Bridgewater and Yeovil over the last couple of months. It also was sparked off by Bus Back Better, which came out in March 2021. It promised something that bus advocates, bus campaigners, bus users have been calling for a long while, some serious investment in improving the quality of bus services across England outside of London. We had the promise of £3 billion to help transform bus services. Unfortunately, 2/3 of that money was used by the government to subsidize bus services during the height of the COVID epidemic. So that left only £1 million, £1.1 million to be split across all the local authorities in England. Somerset had a very good case for being given money through the Bus Back Better scheme, because our bus journeys per head in Somerset had fallen by some 43% in the decade up to the start of COVID. And we had the worst rated bus services in the entire country, and the second lowest bus journeys per head. So it may not have been a great place to begin, but it certainly pointed out the problems which we were facing in Somerset. And on top of that, nearly half of all carbon emissions in Somerset come from transport. So every good reason for Somerset to be well treated by the allocation of the funding from government. And Somerset County Council had 6 months to put together a bus service improvement plan. They used leading consultants, WSP, to help them in that process, and officers at Somerset and WSP developed what was called a bus service improvement plan, often abbreviated to a BSIP, and they submitted that to the Department for Transport at the end of October last year. It was a very ambitious programme, and they asked for £163 million. That was what they said, what Somerset County Council officers and their consultants said was needed to get our bus services in Somerset up to standard. As I think probably most of you know, the reality was we didn't get what we asked for. We got 11.9 million, some 7% of what we asked for. But still, 11.9 million is useful. And Wiltshire and Dorset, neighbouring counties, didn't get anything. There wasn't enough money to go around. There certainly wasn't enough money to give what Somerset needed, but we've got some £12 million, and we'll talk about how that's going to be allocated. We also have to recognise that bus operators are facing huge challenges at the moment. It's very easy to be critical of bus operators, particularly if you're being let down by a bus operator for one reason or another, or indeed if they're about to make any cuts, as has been experienced in Wales over the last few weeks. But bus operators are facing a real problem that bus numbers haven't recovered since COVID. And of course, COVID is still with us now. Passenger numbers are only 65, 70% of the pre-COVID levels. And we're also experiencing a change in usage patterns. More people are able to work at least part of the week from home, and that's affecting bus usage. And on top of that, the problems just keep on mounting for the bus operators. There is a shortage of drivers. There is an industry-wide shortage of drivers, and that's certainly been felt by bus operators in our part of the world. But one of the worst and most dramatic changes has been soaring costs, most especially in fuel, to a lesser extent in terms of wages, but fuel costs have gone through the roof, as they have for car drivers as well. But it's like a perfect storm: reduced revenue from reduced number of passengers and escalating costs. It's a real challenge. And we have to work to help those bus operators get through this crisis. And there was an election in May, and all the political parties put out a manifesto. And so we thought we'd put out a bus manifesto, because in previous elections at county, buses haven't really played much of a part. I think we can say with some sense of satisfaction that Somerset Bus Partnership made buses a really significant issue in this election. It was a 6-point manifesto. And one of the most important points was the fact that we just were not spending as much on buses, on supporting bus services, as other counties, most especially other rural counties around Somerset. And as you can see from this chart, Somerset's the blue bar, some 40% below the average for other rural counties. We've been underinvesting in buses for many good reasons. There have been many demands on Somerset's budgets, but as a consequence, we've seen bus cuts going on over the past 10 years, and the county does need to spend more money on buses. And that's exactly what we said. We need to invest in bus transport by making funds available from the new council's programme. And the important thing was that was agreed by the major political parties, all the major political parties standing for Somerset. And one of the reasons all of the parties could do that is that over the next 5 years of this council, which will become a unitary council, there are going to be great savings to be made. And there was a commitment to spend some of that money, at least, on improving our bus services. So we saw a change of political control in Somerset, but significantly, nearly 2/3, 64% of the newly elected members of the Somerset County Council have endorsed our Somerset Bus Partnership bus manifesto. And we had support from all the parties. I think we could have got it up to an even higher percentage, but we called it a day on the day of the election. But 64% of newly elected members are committed to spending more money on buses across Somerset over the term of the current council. So that's good news, having heard quite a lot of disappointing news. And if we just look at what the Lib Dems, who are the majority party now on the council, said, they want to fundamentally overhaul our public transport system to make it a viable and significant means of transport in the county, based primarily on our bus network, because rail is not available in most parts of the county, but buses are, and it's buses which are going to be the key element in public transport provision in Somerset. So we come on to bus cuts now, and I don't know if anyone in Wales would want to make some comment, because it has been in Wales that we've seen bus cuts, even more severe cuts in the Oval and in Bridgewater, and to a lesser extent, but still quite significant ones in Taunton as well. And as we will talk about later on, there will be more cuts in October. So far, we've seen bus cuts from Buses of Somerset and South West Coaches. And the specific cuts in Wales are 75 and the 29. I see I've got a hand up from, I've only got you down as a code number, so please say who you are and raise the issue you wish to.
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Rosa Kell, Kell. I've sent you my email address. I am very, very concerned at the lack of transport to Musgrove. That bus 29 may have been far too small a service, but to have no service at all is terrible. For the majority of older people, pensioners or disabled people, especially those of us who live on the Portway estate and further that way, we have to catch a bus into town, catch a bus from town to go to Glastonbury, to change, to get to Taunton. And we have to do the return trip. I'm sure you appreciate that that's 6 hours, virtually 5 hours of traveling.
Yeah.
It's exhausting and totally impractical. And the alternative is £50 on the community passenger service. It's just, we've got to do something about buses. We've got to put pressure on however we can do it on the new unitary unit, that we must have connecting buses and we must have buses that run after 5:30. Not everyone works 9 to 5 if they work. We need better access to transport. I mean, Wells is a city, it's a major hub, but we seem to have been cut off. I'm sure Shepton has the same problems, but in comparison to Frome, for instance, we are nowhere. So I don't know what else to say. I'm sure there are other people in Wales who would have similar opinion, but I would like to put pressure on the planning authorities to get them to put bus stops outside every new estate that they put up. At least there would be somewhere for a bus to stop if we could put buses on. Would perhaps not a solution be smaller buses? Would they not be more economical to run with biofuels or various fuels other than diesel? Or I don't know how they're running these days, but clearly there must be a better way of running a system.
One of the problems with smaller buses is you've still got to pay the same amount of money to the driver. And the advantage of larger buses is that they can carry more people at peak times. It can be frustrating, and I've heard it expressed many times that in off-peak times, you're seeing sometimes quite large buses with very few people on, but bus companies can't afford to have buses just standing still. They need to keep them operating.
No, I understand that, but it cannot be beyond the knowledge of man with current computer systems and whatever, to have larger buses running, say, from 7 o'clock in the morning to 9:30 in the morning, and smaller buses during the middle of the day, and larger buses between 2:30 and 4:30.
It's just it would be a very costly bus service to run. If you've paid £500,000 for a bus for it to be only operating for 3 or 4 hours a day, it's a very expensive overhead. But I think
I'm not saying only operating in those, but operating on lesser viable routes, smaller buses.
Okay. So
I mean,
the issue is of Musgrove. Is that a issue that other people wish to raise? But because I've heard it mentioned to me by other people in Wales.
Anyone else from Wales who wishes to make comments?
Back as a resident that was in Wales for 14 years and was the designer behind that bus station. and we spent an awful lot of taxpayers' money on it. We designed it as a hub. At that time, we worked with Baines Council in North Somerset, and the idea was that it was the place where First Group would hub and spoke all their regional bus network. So buses came in from Bristol, went out to Street, went down to Yeovil, went across to Bridgewater, and then went across to Weston-super-Mare and to Shepton. At that time, they also went through to Frome, and we didn't split the buses at Wells. Actually, First Group ran those buses straight through. One went to Bridgewater from Bristol, and the other went from Bristol to Yeovil. By the way, I get fed up with these names. I wish people would stop using them. Buses of Somerset, as we heard from last night from one of the former managers who's about to set up his own bus company, is actually a big division of First Group PLC. Let's be absolutely clear about that. And the reason I put that in the chat, whoever is objecting, they must be an employee first, I think. It's just to make it clear that these decisions are made by a big corporation and not made by some local manager based in Taunton or based in fact, the managing director, and I haven't put his name there yet, is Simon Goff, and he's based in Southampton. So they're made on a real big national level, and they come through with the cuts, and they come through with agendas and financial balance sheets, which the group regional directors are going to have to look at. And Doug Claringbold, who's the main manager in Wales, First West of England, which covers Bath, Wales and Western, and then Simon Goff, that covers the rest of Somerset, Devon and Cornwall, then has to perform those balance sheets with the local authorities. Now, what First has done recently is the reason for going big buses is simply to take out cost. I can save a lot of money by removing those single-decker buses and putting in double-deckers, getting rid of the school contract buses and getting rid of the college buses, and I can make savings on drivers, vehicles and finance. And that's good for group profits. It might not be good for passengers, but it's good for group profits. And what we've got to do here through the enhanced quality partnerships is strike a deal between Somerset County Council and the West of England Mayor Dan Norris and North Somerset. There's two enhanced quality partnerships in the historic county of Somerset. And we've got to do a deal with First, really. Now, let's be honest, we've got to do a financial, political deal with First. And I'm not going to steal, Peter can talk through in a moment, the reviews that both the county and WECA are going to do with First Group, which hopefully everybody on this call will want to get involved in, because that is crucial for making sure your parish council, your city council, your local councillor is feeding into Somerset County Council, Dan Norris, Metro Mayor, who actually, by the way, lives in Pensford, for those who are very local, and North Somerset Council. North Somerset Council and WECA is working as one on this situation. To make sure we get the best bus service in October. But it really annoys me, Peter, to see all that investment. I know you've been involved in upgrading it recently as well in the city of Wells, and then we find that the interchange point is a set of bus stops in Glastonbury Town Hall without proper connections to Musgrove Park. So it is disappointing considering the investment the public purse made in Wells Bus Station. I'll leave my point.
Thanks, David. Thank you very much. David, as if you don't know, is one of the leading transport campaigners in the Southwest, very well connected in the Southwest with all the bus operators and also nationally as well. Denise, Councillor Denise Dennis.
Yeah, just the other side of the coin for perhaps the cuts and who it will affect. I would have thought students that attend Bridgewater College, their connections now having to make them that they would have to make in Glastonbury will delay their journeys going to college and make their timetabling maybe a little bit more difficult. So as one of the chat comments made, I do think we need to think about priority for students and patients attending hospital appointments, etc. Not everybody, as the lady said, can afford the costs of private transport. I'm a helper for Wells Community Network, and we are getting calls from people asking for help to get to hospital appointments, and that's obviously because they can't afford to pay the commercial rates.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you very much. So, talking of First Bus, yes, the company which serves the south of Somerset is Buses of Somerset, but First Bus operating out of Bristol is the main supplier of bus services to Mendip. We have the Mendip Explorer and the Discover services. Mendip Explorer very much to Wells and Shepton and Glastonbury. The Discover going to Frome in Mendip. And whilst Buses of Somerset has done a review, we know that First Bus based in Bristol is currently doing a review of its bus services. They're not the only people doing reviews, because as David has mentioned, WECA, the West of England Combined Authority, is undertaking a review of its bus services, and so is Somerset. So there are a whole series of reviews being undertaken, which are going to result in changes, and one must fear cuts, but we've yet to see the nature of those changes. But the very latest news, and it was only announced today, this afternoon, is that Somerset have called a special meeting of their bus advisory board, which is made up of bus operators, council officials, and I'm on that board as well. And we're going to be told about what bus changes, including the cuts in services, that the bus operators propose to make in October of this year. And the reason why October is so important, that's when the government's subsidy of bus operations under the bus recovery grant will come to an end. So it's going to be quite a crunch point, because ever since COVID sort of became an epidemic in the country, there has been billions of pounds spent on supporting bus services across the country. Well, most of that support is going to end in October, and almost inevitably we're going to see reductions in our bus services. So it's a worrying prospect, and those reviews in WECA and Somerset and by the bus operators will conclude, and we should know at this July the 14th meeting what that will mean for towns in Mendip. Towns in Mendip, because of our adjacency to WECA and being part of Somerset, both of those local transport authorities can influence and may choose to help maintain some of the proposed bus services which might be being cut. We wait to see. The point we've made to Somerset about the cuts which were made recently, including the cuts made in Wales, the much more draconian ones in Yeovil. I'm down in Yeovil tomorrow morning talking to people down there about the cuts that they're experiencing, and in Taunton and Bridgewater, was really there was no consultation. It was announced very late. In fact, in many cases, particularly in Yeovil, bus users weren't told at all about bus cuts which were being made, and people were just turning up at bus stops which had no information about the bus cuts, waiting for buses which were never going to come. So there was a lack of consultation, a lack of consideration about the options. One of the options is, of course, councils can step in and support bus services which are in need of financial help if the social need is strong enough. Without the consultation, that meant that county councillors in particular weren't aware of what was really going to happen. And so they weren't arguing the case to the powers that be that there was a particular need for a particular bus service to be maintained. We've raised this with the new administration, and I think the reason why we're being told in the middle of June about the proposed cuts is that it will be an opportunity for representations to be made to try and perhaps mitigate some of the proposed changes that are likely to be put forward on July the 14th. And one of the key things we've argued is there has to be information. It's a problem, particularly in Somerset, the lack of information and reliable information and accurate information at bus stops and bus shelters, and even in bus stations across the county. The provision of information to bus users is just not up to standard, and it really needs to be addressed. So I mentioned earlier that Somerset had been granted £11.9 million from its BSIT bid, which is now being used to fund an enhanced partnership. This is a partnership between the county council and the bus operators, and also by, well, in our case, it's Somerset, but a similar process is happening in Wecker. And Somerset had to decide what to do with that 11.9 million, but they had very limited flexibility as to what it was going to be spent on, because the Department for Transport said it would only confirm the 11.9 million if Somerset spent it along the outline that the Department for Transport stated. Most of the money was going to be capital investment, so couldn't be spent on improving bus services themselves. Any bus services which were going to be supported would have to be new bus services, so it couldn't be used to maintain existing bus services. And the capital expenditure had to be primarily on building bus priority lanes. Now, within Somerset, the major town which needs bus priority lanes is Taunton, to a much lesser extent also Bridgewater. And so nearly all the money, 3/4 of the money, is being spent on bus priorities in Taunton and on other support services in Taunton. And as a Mendip representative, I felt that isn't the news I wanted to hear. But the rationale for it is that Somerset doesn't need 11.9 million. Somerset needs 163 million. And the best way of getting more money from the county is to spend what money they've been given in a focused way so that it can be shown to make a real difference in terms of bus usage. And so by spending this money all in Taunton, it will demonstrate to the Department for Transport that Somerset can deliver improvements in bus services which see more people using those buses. And therefore, there is the hope that they will be given larger grants going forward. That approach was the approach which was agreed under a Conservative administration and has been confirmed by the new Liberal Democrat administration. So whilst one would like to see the money spent more equitably across the whole county, that's why most of the money is nearly all the money is going to be spent in Taunton and one or two ancillary offshoots in Somerton and Bridgewater, but most of the money is going to be spent in Taunton. I don't know if anybody wants to ask anything about that, or if it is a fait accompli. It was largely a fait accompli by the way the Department for Transport said this is how the money needs to be spent. Okay, moving on to a more positive approach. What can we do about it? What can we as councillors, I'm a parish councillor, I know there are a number of town and parish councillors on the meeting this evening. Bus campaigners, bus users, what can we do to try and improve our buses and to protect our buses? And there is a famous maxim for buses that we've all heard many times: use it or lose it. And it really is the case. At the moment, not enough people who used to use the buses are continuing to use those buses. And that's one of the reasons why we are likely to see some more bus cuts, particularly older people, many of whom with their senior passes can travel on buses free of charge. The number of older people who've returned to buses is probably only something like 60% of what it was pre-COVID. So there's a real need to try and encourage everyone back onto buses, particularly to reassure older people that perhaps it now is a sensible thing to start to use buses again. And we bus campaigners actually have to do quite a bit of the marketing for buses. You don't see television adverts telling you to go on buses. You don't see press adverts hardly at all to go on buses. The bus industry is very good at operating buses, but it's not so good at promoting and encouraging the use of buses. They spend next to nothing on that. And in fact, First Bus based in Bristol has just made the decision to stop printing all printed timetables. Yeah, an awful lot of bus passengers can't access online information, and an awful lot of bus stops and bus stations and bus shelters across Mendip do not have up-to-date printed timetables. So that decision not to print bus route timetables makes it very difficult for people to know what the time of the next bus is. And in Yeovil, what happened just ahead of the bus cuts, as David would prefer me to say, First Bus, buses of Somerset, their bus drivers were telling their regular customers, people who every day were going on buses, that those First Bus buses, that they didn't have a timetable for the new bus services which were going to be introduced the following week. And there were no information was put up on the bus stops. And so we campaigners, we people who care about buses, have to try and perform the role that the bus companies aren't doing well enough. And this is something we're taking up with Somerset very, very strongly, that there is a real need to give better provision of information to bus users. In September, we're going to have a Catch the Bus month, where we want to encourage as many people as possible to get back on the bus and use the bus. And here in Somerset, we'll have our own version of it, the Somerset Catch the Bus campaign. And the particular focus in Somerset is from September the 3rd to the 11th. And we'd like to encourage everyone to do as much as they can to encourage bus usage. It would be great to see bus stalls in the high streets of local towns or the main streets of villages, just giving out information about bus times, telling people about bus times, yes, perhaps printing your own timetables, and being there to encourage people to use the bus and telling people when the buses are running. And as I keep on saying, the most important thing is that they know the times of buses. And so it's important that we get up-to-date information on bus stops. And this is another thing that our bus user groups are now doing, is when they see bus stops without the correct information, they're running off the timetables themselves and sticking it up on the notice boards. They shouldn't have to do that. But on the other hand, if they don't do it, people aren't going to know when the buses are running. And in my own village, which is one just to the north of Frome, we have 2 different bus services running through our village, and we produce an integrated bus timetable just for our village, telling people what time the buses are going to Frome or to Bath or to Trowbridge, and what time they're coming back from Frome or Bath or Trowbridge. And we door drop that. Our parish councillors post that through every door, a letterbox in the village, and we update it as and when there are changes. And the cost of that, we get it professionally printed by a local printer, costs us about £150, £160 for a village of 1,600 people, and a bit of shoe leather from the parish councillors for delivering it. We've persuaded other parishes to do the same thing. We've persuaded Frome to do the same thing. We would urge you to think about doing that. It takes some time to put it together, but it's not a difficult task. And it does mean that everyone in the immediate locality knows the times of the buses. And that's the most important thing if you're going to get people to use buses, and particularly to use buses more regularly. And we have the Catch the Bus Week with the famous green hands. What we'd like to suggest you do during the month of September, particularly during the 3rd to the 11th of September, is get your councillors to bus it as much as they can in September. I think every district, every county councillor and every town and parish councillor should really be challenged to bus it, if not all the time, certainly more than they have been doing, just so that they hear firsthand from bus users what they think of the bus services, and they hear firsthand what the problems and the good things about travelling by buses are. Let's invite your MP to go by bus, if only once, and let's photograph him and post it on Facebook. In fact, if you can get your county councillors, your town councillors to go on the bus, then with you, then put it on Facebook. Let's get as many pictures of elected officials, whether it's to Parliament or to a council, travelling by bus, to show that they're part of the bus travelling community. And every councillor on this call, it would be a good thing to put this as a topic on your next agenda in your August meetings, that the bus month of September is something that your council should support, encourage, possibly encouraging a bus user group or other enthusiasts to have a stall in the high street, helping them organise that, perhaps getting councillors, getting publicity for the event, trying to make it into a major event within your community. What we really need is bus champions. and this is what our local bus representatives are, and we're very keen to get more local bus representatives. We've got a lot across. Mendip. What we like to be challenging them to do in September is to set up a school, may just be a small table, not just to go down to the local cafe, sitting there.
Peter, you're fading into obscurity.
Oh dear. Am I still fading? Can you
That's
hear
fine.
me?
If that's fine now.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that was. I'll have a word with Apple computers later on. So yes, bus champions, we want them to organize some sort of event in their village, in their town, to make Catch the Bus month meaningful and to get that point across to as many people as possible. We are having to do the marketing job for the bus operators. The councillors on the call, we're going to be writing to all the councils, inviting them to endorse our bus manifesto, as indeed have the 2/3 of the county councillors. And then finally, we ask our bus champions to check their local bus stops, report any bus stops which are not in good condition. I'm sad to say that in the market towns of Mendip, there are a lot of very poor bus stops and bus shelters, or particularly bus shelters. And I have visited all the towns in Mendip and looked at the bus shelters, and many of them are in need of some tender loving care. I think it's something that town and city councillors need to just give thought to. Yes, if you possibly can, to distribute local bus timetables and to use social media, which is such a powerful weapon nowadays, whether we like it or not. Facebook has got such enormous reach, to use that to update people about issues on buses. So I'm now going to stop sharing my screen and let's get some comment on all of that. Let's start with Dennis, who is responsible for transport issues at Wells. Denise.
I'm a representative. I'm not sure that I'm responsible.
Okay.
But I have written to Mendip about the state of the bus station on behalf of a constituent, put his points across. I've had a couple of emails back. Apparently, there is an ongoing project from Mendip to see bus shelter adaptations and improvements through the summer, not just in Wells, but across the district. So I just thought I'd share that. That's what they are promising. They said that electronic boards aren't Mendip's responsibility. They suggest we go back to First buses and negotiate that with them. And they say which they did spend some money last year on the resurfacing of the tarmac and pedestrian guardrails, etc. But already coaches have damaged them. So, you know, we're back to square one with some of the railings, but they apparently say they're going to be looking at across Mendip improvements over the summer to some things like the bus shelters.
Well, certainly there is a big need for it. I think of all the 4 districts, Mendip is the worst in terms of the standard of the bus shelters. Susanna Clements, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Sorry, delay there.
There we are. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to ask on how are bus users represented on the bus advisory board?
On the bus advisory board, officially,
We can't hear you, Peter.
yeah.
It's gone again, Peter.
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No, you
Yeah,
can't.
yes.
You can.
We-
It's intermittent, obviously. I do apologise, not had this problem before. The bus user and stakeholder group has a chair and vice chair, and they are members of the bus advisory board. But in fact, Somerset have allowed a number of other representatives of bus users onto that board. David Redwall, for example, is also on that board. So there are about 5 people representing bus users on that board. There are the officers from Somerset and all the bus operators. We have a separate board, which is the bus users and stakeholder group, which is also got officers from Somerset on, and anyone who represents any institution within Somerset, any voluntary group in Somerset can join those meetings.
Okay, it struck me, especially after what Dave was saying earlier, that the companies obviously have their own agenda to do with money, but in order for us to get across what we need, we're going to have to shout really loudly, because it's otherwise we could do all sorts of good things like doing their work for them, putting up timetables and advertising and so forth. But unless we really bang the table there at the board and complain, why would they do anything about it? Unless we make life quite hard for them, they're not going to do anything about it at all.
Well, of course, bus companies are in it to make profit. So the people, if you hear of potential cuts affecting you, people you really have to get hold of is your county councillors, because the county council can step in and subsidise routes to keep them going. And so it's your county councillors who are absolutely key to protecting your bus services. And what is good this time round is that there is going to be the time for county councillors to lobby Somerset about supporting particular routes which might be being threatened by cuts. In the May round of cuts, there wasn't the time to do it, but for the ones in October, which we're going to get told about in July, there will be time, and it's your county councillors who are going to be the people who can argue the case with the leadership at Somerset County Council that particular routes are deserving of subsidy for social reasons. David, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I mean, I did put in the chat. I don't know where it is. I think it might be after the next first, but I wanted to come back in and just say that on the Dan Norris, and you also attended, Peter, the excellent forum he held with that 100 people at Polton, and we did have Mendip reps there. There was Mendip councillors there. Mendip there was actually Sedgemoor councillors there as well, and we had Somerset Tourism Board, didn't we, there as well? And he had First and Stagecoach there. And that's the kind of thing we need to encourage Mike Rigby to do in Somerset, working with Dan and with a gentleman called Steve Hodges, who's the leader of North Somerset on public transport. So the Somerset authorities work together. My concern is about the weak links across Mendip, because Dan Norris is actually the cash holder, the purse string holder of the 173, which is the Wells to Bath route via Chilcompton, and the 174 via Shepton Mallet into Bath via Radstock and Midsummer, Norton and Peasdown. So these are important links to Wells. He's also the biggest shareholder in terms of cash, in terms of what he does with the 376. The 376 is a very popular bus in terms of politicians. They all want to grab hold of it. The Mayor of Bristol even sees it very important, wants to increase its frequency, because it's a very important bus when it gets to Bristol. So I think the 376 will survive in some form or another. It may get reduced in frequency, but nevertheless it will be invested in. And there's a 126, which I'm very annoyed it's been allowed. The 126, by the way, is a Wells bus station to Westbury sub Mendip and out through Draycott and out through Cheddar and out through Axbridge and Sidcutt and goes through Banwell and Winscombe and Banwell, and then Locking and Weston Supermare bus station, the new one. Bus station, that is. And that one worries me because it doesn't have at the moment, a Sunday service. It doesn't, as that came out last night, it's going to have a Sunday service in the middle of school holidays, but it hasn't got one now. First time in 70 years, no Sunday service. It's got no evening service as such. And yet that's an important link. And, you know, these routes are very important. Now, they're covered by WECA and North Somerset. So any councillors or parish council will make representations on those. Please make representation to Councillor Mike Rigby at Somerset County Council, but please also make representations to Dan Norris and Steve Hodges at the West England Mineral Combined Authority at North Somerset Council. And in fact, it's a public meeting, it's open to the public. You can go and speak at it, provided you register Midsummer on Town Hall on the 1st at 12 o'clock and 1400 hours with North Somerset. And you can go and put your point of view if there is concerns about any of the bus routes that run across the border. On the real time, I worked with Tessa Munt. We came up with a solution, but it wouldn't be a Somerset solution. It would be the West of England Mineral Combined Authority has all the real-time information. It's actually subcontracted to Bristol City Council all across Bath and Bristol and South Gloucestershire and even Weston-super-Mare. But if we could extend that from Farrington Gurney, where it finishes now, where Baines has put all the lead in, right down to street, and it would be quite a cheap operation, so we could extend it through from Bath through to Frome Town Centre. And these would be sensible things to do using, Peter, the BSIP from the West of England Mineral Combined Authority with a contribution, BSIP, I should say, correct myself, I'll get shot for this, BSIP with West of England Mineral Combined Authority and North Somerset, putting some Somerset money in there, a small amount, and that would probably improve that corridor, because the Mayor wants to improve the corridor from Bristol to Street, and he wants to improve the corridor from Bath to Wells. So, and he's going to invest a lot of money in those corridors, £540 million of taxpayers' money going into those bus routes and cycling walking corridors. So hopefully we can get the three bits of Somerset, as they call it, the historic county, to work together with the regional transport boards and get some better outcomes. But to have a bus station like Wells with no real-time information, to go into Frome and have no board that tells you what time the next train is up at the train station or what time the next bus goes, or to go to Glastonbury Street and have no information. In this day and age, you could actually have in Wells Glastonbury Street the train departures at Bristol Temple Meads or at Bar Spa if you wanted them. So you knew if you got the bus, what time the next train's going to London or to Birmingham, wherever. I mean, there's more trains at Bath and Bristol, to be honest, than there is at Castle Carey, although I'm a great believer in Castle Carey. It's probably easier to get people into Bristol and Bath with the level of rail services and West-super-Mare than there is. But there's a lot we can do working together, and we need to get everybody talking together around the table. And I hope the Somerset authorities can be able to do that. But Mendip Area Board, when it comes about with the end of the County Council, and the Town and City Council need to be fully on that case. But that's just my advice to everybody tonight.
Would anybody else like to make any comment? Okay. Well, we're very grateful for you joining us this evening. I hope you found it useful, not awfully uplifting at times, but hopefully useful, and we found positive ways to work together going forward. Very keen if people in Wells or in Glastonbury Street are interested in forming a bus user group at any stage, very keen to work with you to help you get it off the ground. And just hope that you'll be joining us during September, waving one of these big green hands for the Catch the Bus Week. Okay, well, if nobody's got anything more to say, I'll wave you goodbye.
Well, Peter, we are going to ask Dan Norris to join the Catch the Bus Week and North Somerset Council. We're asking him for me on Friday for everybody's benefit.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
And Mike Rigby said he's going to join ours as well. Okay.
Bye.
Thank you for everybody for joining us
Peter, I
this
think
evening.
Susanna wants to.
Susanna,
yes.
sorry.
I just want to ask, while we're in this group, I don't know where everybody else is. I'm in Glastonbury. Would anybody else care to join a campaign, a vociferous campaign to get a bus service to Castle Kerry? Because despite what David says, 2 hours to get to the train station is completely no good. For especially for people who have urinary problems, so certain members of my family. So if there's anybody else who would like to join me and other people in Glastonbury and campaign for a Castle Kerry to Glastonbury service, I'd really like to.
If you could include a loop to include Wells, yes, I'll join you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can I just say,
if you can do a loop that will include Wells, I'll definitely join you.
Thank you.
And
So, yeah,
councillors in
thank you.
St Cuthbert Salter would be very keen to support that, because I know they're very keen on a Castle Kerry route as well.
Peter, to be positive
Okay.
to everybody, just positive on that situation, there's a number of services that do go to Castle Kerry. Let's start off by getting Somerset County Council. Please, if I've got the number wrong correctly, the 667, I believe it is, and the number 1 that goes to the station. Number 1 is from Shepton to Yeovil via the station. 667 is from Street. If we get a review of those, services to see if they could be better serving where we've said, like, start them at Glastonbury or extend the one into Wales, then that would make a lot more sense than trying to put subsidy into something to start a new service. And that might be something we can add into the review, and you might want to make that comment to the review.
Yeah, that'd be better. Yeah, better than nothing. Thank you.
It was amazing during on Sunday the number of buses we saw heading towards Glastonbury, certainly from Frome. I was on one of them. They had scores of buses clogging up all our roads, I have to say, in Glastonbury. But I mean, an enormous number of buses were out and about on Sunday.
Well, that's where the money was.
Yes.
Unfortunately. But we can't all afford such luxuries.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
We just want the basics.
Yeah. Yes, that's the most important thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Roger James, cheat.
Yeah, I just want to say a couple of things about Castle Kerry, because I've been sort of pushing Southwest Coaches and the train station, actually letting the number 1 bus, which comes from Shepton through here, Ditchit, down to Castle Kerry and beyond, to actually stop at the station, which it currently doesn't do. Well, it stops outside, you can't get in and off it. I'm still campaigning on pushing on that one, but I'm not getting any response so far. But in terms of future plannings, I think, yes, connecting the 667, which goes to Street, with Glastonbury seems an obvious session to me, and also the Shepton Mallet to Wells connection to get the number 1 to go to Wells, because there's the station here, the car park, has just been expanded by 300 cars.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a massive number of people coming to Castle Kerry station, and buses to it would be really helpful, because this taxi service is crap and the taxi drivers are not very helpful most of the time. So I just think looking at how little extensions here and there can actually connect up to a major transport hub, like, I mean, perhaps Castlecary isn't major, but it's quite significant in these parts.
But Castlecary to go to Frome by train, to go down to Weymouth by train, there is no way of getting there. If you want to take an elderly person, or even like myself, who's partially disabled, to go down to the seaside, for instance, down to Weymouth, the train is there, that the routes are there, but we can't get to the train station.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. You can get to Weymouth, you can get to, you know, Yeovil, whatever, but you can get to all sorts of places on that train. You can't get to the station.
Yes, jump on the train to go down to Bath, which is fantastic. It's much quicker than the bus. And you don't have to worry about, you know, it's the same location, basically, than the bus station in Bath.
In terms of passenger utilization, getting more links to the station would mop up a lot of people to a lot more locations. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, yes.
And also now when this petrol price is so high, it's going to be worth, it might even be worth people's while. I mean, I know it would be great to extend the 667 to Glastonbury, but it's already a 44-minute journey, which very circuitous. It's a lovely journey. But if we could have something quick, it might well be worth a lot of people's while, instead of paying for parking and petrol, to hop on a bus if we could get there.
Well, I would agree with you about the distance, but it may be just looking what's realistic and what's possible, as well as ideally, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I just thought it would be quite an easy campaign to run, to go to Castle. I thought, you know, I could go with maybe one or two other people, go to Castlecary station, actually do a paper survey and say to people, where you come from, what would you be prepared to pay for a bus? Would you like a bus service? What times would you like? And so forth, just to collect data for a start, and see what sort of, I don't know, to raise interest. Because I think a lot of people would, I mean, I do a climate emergency information stall in Glastonbury on a Tuesday. People are so keen to do something. They want to change the way that they get around and everything, but they don't know where to turn, because they're all individuals, and they sort of need to see that somebody's prepared to step up and lay it on for them.
I mean, going back to who should do this, it's actually First Group again, because it's Great Western Railway, which is part of them as well, and South Western Railway, which is also part of them. But working with Somerset County Council and the South West Transport Board, which is a regional body. And I think maybe we should try to get a meeting. Now, in the days when I lived in Wales, we used to invite regularly, twice a year, to the City Council, the manager for Castlecary Station, to go to Wales and come and talk to the City Council about that. And we also had the county there and First Bus to talk about just what we're talking about now. And in those days, we have more buses going there, I can assure you. And I just think there are officials in First Group. Well, I've put them in the chat. Luke Farley, who works in rail, but is actually a bus official in First, and a guy called Dan Oakley. And we need to get them together in the room. So I think either we do it through Somerset Bus Partnership, Peter, or we do it in conjunction, I suggest, with the City Council and the parishes. We perhaps have either a real meeting or a hybrid meeting or a Teams meeting, whichever you want to do. And we get these officials to one of these meetings, maybe the next one. And like we're doing about to try and set something up on Taunton Bus Station, I think probably a good idea, Peter, might be to try and set something up on Castlecary Railway Station, because I understand from Dan Oakey, another name I'm going to give you now for the benefit of those who like First Group officials, Mark Hotwood, who's very into his buses and trains the MD of First Great Western, that they have some money for bus for integration at Castlecary, and I think we ought to jump on it before we lose it. And it's Department for Transport money. So one, we need to understand what money's there. Two, what the money's been spent on. And three, what bus links Dan's proposing with Luke and First Bus and South West Coaches. So I think that's work in progress. So let's do it now, whilst that project's not, as far as I'm aware, signed off and being been completed. And whilst we're talking about the station, Peter has been involved with myself, and I've been involved in writing the bid, support bid for the bid, for disabled lifts and for fully accessible stations. So you can use it 24/7, because you rightly point out, the trains run through there quite late at night. And there's still trains to and from London in the evenings. And when I lived in Wales, we actually had buses that left Castle Cary Station, believe it or not, 8:15 in the evening back to Wales and Shepton Mallet. And believe it or not, we had buses as well that on a Sunday used to get you into Castle Cary Station for 9:30 for a train to Weymouth. So we did it.
Sounds like dreams. Can we have half of that?
It's only 10 years ago. This is the sad thing about it. But let's just go back and see where we are and see
Castle Cary Station, if you haven't been there for a while, is undergoing, not from the station itself exactly, but it's undergoing a massive redevelopment there from Mr. Newt.
Yeah.
And he's rebuilding, I think maybe it's a milk factory before, but it's going to be like a cheese production. There's going to be a cafe there and all sorts of stuff and links to the Newt. So Castle Cary Station is probably going to get more attractive as a venue than it was before, because it's got all that development from Mr. Newt going on alongside it.
But it's got direct trains to London in under 2 hours. We should be able to get a roundabout mini bus that goes around the villages and round the major areas to meet every one of those trains.
See, this is where DRT, Peter, and it's met in the way the Department for Transport actually wanted to run it, is where this would be much better spent than some other ideas that are floating around Somerset at the moment. But
it pisses me off. But there's road closures coming up everywhere around Shepton and places, but spending endless millions on road development, whatever, and yet you can't get a few million spent on a bus. Ridiculous.
Well, let's go back and see where we are, because some of this is DFT money. It's DFT rail as well as DST bus. It's not DFT bus. It's not necessarily Somerset County. You got a new administration. They'll review all the policies, and they'll want to look at making sure with Western Gateway Transport Board, which covers everything in the north of the county of Somerset, that's the Wecker area, and North Somerset, and Southwest Transport Board, that's the sub-regional board for Somerset, Torbay, Plymouth, and Cornwall, that we're maximising our amount of money for rail and rail investment.
But this is the problem. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Carry on.
No, I was just going to say, Devon's been very successful and Cornwall's been very successful on bus rail integration. And you've got, I don't know how on this call was, but you've got in Mark Hotwood, one of the most progressive managing directors in First Group, who actually believes in bus rail integration. So let's see what he's got a team, and that team works with bus and rail companies, and let's see what we can do with First Group. And I think, Peter, it's a case of Somerset Bus Partnership, but maybe Wales City Council with Street Council, and well, maybe the council's on this call, but a specialist meeting, which is basically Castle Cary Station.
Yeah.
How do you get there with Dan O'Key, Luke Farley, Simon Goffel, a representative for Southwest, somebody from Southwest Coaches.
Southwest Coaches run the buses to Cary's at the moment.
Yeah, but First will obviously be interested because they are a corporate. If they're putting a lot of money into the station, they'll want to look at whether there's anything they can do with their own buses, and you've got to give them opportunity also to look at there. So you've got to invite them to the. One of the things we did in the past was to extend this funny bus that's now going. Well, I hope this funny bus we can kill dead soon. This business where you run from Somerton to Taunton and not into Yeovil. But one of what we did in the past was to run that Somerton bus, believe it or not, into Castle Cary Station. So there are things. One option might be, you have a connection with a 77 from Wales Glastonbury Street straight into the the bus at Somerton and straight into Cascary. There might be other options that could be looked at. I'm just saying there was other options we looked at which are faster and were faster in the past. So invite first bus, first rail, South West coaches, any other bus operators, county council, and the parish and town and city council, and try and have a conversation and see where we go with it. Network rail. That's my proposal anyway.
Okay. Well,
All I want is a bus to Musgrave. So, Castle Carey can take a bit behind that one.
It
Thank
might
you
just
very-
it might
thank you very
just
much for
be
organising
it
it.
might just be we've got the Castle Carey money now. That's the issue.
Well,
Uh,
if it's available, let's grab it.
That's exactly that's why I'm suggesting the meeting now.
It will solve the problem of going via Shepton or via Glastonbury.
Of course, the other option, of course, for Musgrove is if you've got good bus links to Cascary, as I pointed out, we'll point out tomorrow night. You are in a position to, of course, have later trains at 8:15 from Taunton Station that gets you into Cascary, which possibly get you a bus to Wells Glastonbury and straight. So there's other ways of getting to
But you
Musgrove.
can't get from the hospital to the station, as I know to my cost. Or vice
No
versa.
buses that way, really? Oh dear.
Well, I know I was at the hospital thinking, oh, I'd really like to get to the station to catch a train, but couldn't see how to do it. Possibly, I don't know.
You're going to go into Taunton bus station and catch another bus.
I don't know. I just gave up in the end.
There's a circular bus within Taunton. You should have been able to do it.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
There are buses, but Taunton bus station's closed at the moment. We're trying to get that reopened. Anyway, but there are buses. The park and ride buses do run from Musgrove Park to the town centre, and you change at the town centre, and you can pick up the 29 at 5:20, which will take you up to now used to take you to Wales, of course, now it takes you to Glastonbury.
Yes.
Which is very disappointing. And on Sundays, I'm in Western Hospital tonight, and I'll just say to you, if you need to get from Wales to Western Hospital on Sunday, it's impossible unless you go via Bristol. If you need to go, Peter, from Wales to Aston Street to Taunton Hospital on Sunday, visit loved ones, or to Western, you're faced to go Temple Mead Station and catch the train down to Western, taxi or bus to the hospital. Same at Musgrove Park. Now, I just think that's not a transport service for the people of Somerset, and I despair really, but that is the Sunday network, and we need to work on that.
Okay, David. Well, thank you. I think unexpectedly, the Castle Carey has raised its head again as a real issue for Mendip, quite a number of Mendip towns, and I'll take on board what David suggested and see if we can work with Glastonbury and Wells and Street and Somerset County Council and First Group, and with David, of course, to see if we can explore some options. And it's been raised certainly over the last 18 months, and I think this evening it's perhaps progressed more actively than at any stage up until then. So let's see if we can keep the momentum and take it on from here. So yeah. I'll keep you posted, and we'll see if we can set up a meeting with the most interested parties. So
yeah, I'm willing to pitch in on that one as well, Peter. Just as is on.
Well, you started it. I blame you for it. Yeah, Roger, I agree with you. Yeah. Okay, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. A good night to you as well, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Yeah, thanks all. Okay, cheers.
Thanks.